Good afternoon. My name is Hamid Ghaffari. Before I get started, I want to go ahead and get to know each one of you. What's your name?
Hi,
Hi, Ryan. How are you?
thanks.
And what's your name? Hi, Holly. How are you? So today we want to talk about the future of air traffic control funding and modernization. Now, I got to tell you personally, one of the things that I do hate is waiting in lines. It seems like our society has become infatuated with being impatient. We don't like waiting in lines, whether it's at the TSA, waiting to board an airplane, or whether it's getting on board an airplane and waiting to taxi and then take off, and then landing and trying to get to the gate. It just seems our life is riddled with waiting and delays these days, and we just don't like that, right? We're constantly waiting in lines. So why should we be concerned about air traffic control funding and its impact on safety, modernization, and, believe it or not, delays? In 2013, the chair of the Senate Transportation Committee, Senator Rockefeller, was quoted as saying the following: "Unlike other transportation systems, we have a comprehensive plan to move our aviation system into the 21st century, but the erosion of the FAA's budget threatens our ability to make continuous improvement to aviation safety that we have made since the Wright brothers." So really, what's the problem? Number one is the current funding mechanism for the air traffic control system appears to be broken and somewhat unreliable because it has to do with the congressional budget process, the appropriations process, and the authorization process. So how do we ensure that the federal government provides stable and predictable funding to the Federal Aviation Administration to ensure that we have the safest and most modern system in the world? Today, I want to cover two possible options. While there could be many more options, we're going to focus on these two options. Option number one that we'll discuss is status quo. Don't change anything. We got the most complex and the safest system in the world. Why mess with a good thing? But exempt the FAA from sequestration cuts and other budget cuts. Now you may ask yourself, what are sequestration cuts? Well, as part of the debt ceiling negotiations, the lawmakers could not come to an agreement, and that resulted in this sequestration law that automatically cuts non-defense budgets of every federal government branch by a certain percentage. Automatically. The second option I want to talk to you about today is privatizing the air traffic control system into a non-for-profit corporation, which obviously takes it out of the government appropriation and budgeting process and the government bureaucracy associated with procurement and modernization and so forth. Before we do that, let's briefly talk about air traffic control. First of all, what do they do? The major responsibility for air traffic controllers is to prevent collisions between aircraft. Where do they work? They work at air traffic control towers, which everyone gets to see them on the airports, but they also work in radar approach controls and radar en route centers. Who do they work for? Well, they're federal employees. They work for the federal government as part of the Federal Aviation Administration, which is a branch of the Department of Transportation. Let's discuss option one, as we discussed, the safest, most complex system in the world. In May of 2017, the Department of Transportation Inspector General testified before Congress and said the following: "Since 1958, the FAA has overseen the safe operation of the busiest and most complex air traffic system in the world." In addition to the Department of Transportation Inspector General, the union representing the air traffic controllers, the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, also testified before Congress and stated the following: "The U.S. national airspace system is the safest, most efficient, most complex, and most diverse system in the world." Lastly, in June of 2013, issue of Congressional Digest, National Transportation Safety Board was quoted as saying, "The National Transportation Safety Board reports that air travel today is safer than ever." So clearly, based on the congressional testimony and the report from the National Transportation Safety Board, we have the safest and most complex aviation system in the world. Why would we want to change something that doesn't appear to be broken? However, what we would need to do is exempt the FAA from the sequestration, the automatic spending cuts, and further budget cuts. Some of the problems with the status quo of remaining within the government. Obviously, if there wouldn't be agreement on exempting us from sequestration and budget cuts, it would be further budget stops and starts. It would be part of the government shutdowns that has happened in the past five years, where there's been some government shutdowns, some threats of government shutdowns, and every time there's a threat of government shutdown, the FAA stops working on modernization projects, they stop hiring. So stop and go funding has not worked. In 2013, when air traffic controllers were furloughed because of sequestration, delays rocketed, and the FAA stopped hiring for almost a year. That's actually caused us some serious problems because, as President Paul Rinaldi of the Air Traffic Controllers Association testified before Congress, air traffic control staffing is at a 28-year low. 1/4 of the air traffic controller workforce is eligible to retire today. An additional problem of the stop and start funding is the long-term planning for modernization projects, equipment maintenance, and replacing aging infrastructure. Now let's discuss a little bit option 2. This is really nothing that's new about privatizing the air traffic control system. In one form or another, this has been discussed since the 1980s. Mainly the proponents of this privatization has been the airlines. Some of the proponents have brought up the following as benefits of a privatized system. FAA funding is not subject to the congressional budget process. You don't have to worry about the debt ceiling, you don't have to worry about sequestration cuts, and you don't have to worry about the procurement bureaucracy that is associated with delayed bringing on board of new technology and new procedures. NACA President Paul Rinaldi testified in May of 2017 saying the following about why we need change. Without change, our nation risks falling behind the rest of the world and losing its status as a global leader in aviation. Globalization and innovation are driving dramatic changes in the aviation industry, and sadly, America's current structure is not keeping up. In June of 2017, the Associated Press reported the following. FAA's procurement process is cumbersome. It's riddled with delays. By the time new technology is brought on board, it's already out of date. The delays in updating and incorporating this new technology is now costing the airlines billions of dollars a year for them equipping their aircraft with this new technology and then not being able to use it. Corporation, as I said, is free from government regulations. It has self-sustained funding through user fees, and the FAA would still provide safety oversight of this corporation. Some of the challenges with a privatized ATC system is the airlines would have a major stake in running the corporation. And we've seen some of the problems the airlines have experienced with massive computer outages, some passenger customer service complaints, and so forth. And certainly the user fee system, it would charge all the users of the system, which some of the smaller private operators, business operators, smaller airports, they fear that airlines dominating the corporation's board is going to result in higher fees and less service. So let's summarize. Option 1, status quo. Keep air traffic control as part of the federal government, but exempt it from sequestration and other budget cuts, but it'll still be subjected to government bureaucracy. Option 2, as we discussed, is privatize the air traffic control system, but risk having airlines gain control and influence over the system and potentially increase costs for small operators and smaller airports, less service for smaller airports. Bottom line is, we do need change. To do nothing really is not an option. Delays, safety, and modernization will be at risk if we do nothing. If we do nothing, we're going to have more delays, and none of us want delays. So at this point, I'll go ahead and open it up to any questions.
So what do you think is the better option?
So as I started out by saying, we can only, in this short span of 10 minutes, cover 2 options. But really, between the two, what we do need is stable and predictable funding. That's number 1. But number 2 is we need a system that is free of bureaucracy. And unfortunately, looking at Congress today, they can't seem to agree on anything. So in looking at the two options, a system that is free of the government bureaucracy and the partisan politics would be the option I would prefer. Ryan, do you have a question?
Which method do air traffic controllers prefer?
So President Paul Rinaldi actually testified before Congress. He represents the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, and he said there's many ways to fix this problem. What we do need is that stable and predictable funding piece. So really, it depends on the details of whatever legislation is put forward, whether it's for privatization or whether it's to exempt the Federal Aviation Administration from budget cuts and sequestration. So the devil's in the details. We need to see what's in those details. And what the controllers say is they need to see the details to ensure they have stable and predictable funding, that this new corporation would be open to everyone. It wouldn't limit air travel to, let's say, the large corporations, the large airlines, that small operators could still use the service. It wouldn't raise the cost, that safety would still be number one, and that the air traffic controllers would continue to enjoy the benefits of belonging to a union and having collective bargaining rights. Thank you so much.